Writing inspiration can come from anywhere. You can be watching a movie or a TV show and be like, hey, you know what? I can put a unique twist on this. Or you could be talking to a friend and say, what did you just say? That would make an amazing story. Or you can be walking the dog down the street and you can see something that makes you stop and go, what if? And all of these things are great catalysts for inspiration. And I make sure to use these all the time. And one of my favorite catalysts is definitely conversation with other creatives, because not only can it be super inspiring for story ideas, but it can be really crucial when it comes to the kind of advice that you might not have thought of before that actually can be life-changing in your career. And I was having a similar conversation to that. I was having a conversation with a friend who's an artist. She kind of went from being a stay-at-home mom to a single mom to all of a sudden going, you know what? This hobby I have of painting, I want to transform this into something that sustains me financially and emotionally and creatively in my life. And she managed to do that in a relatively short time. And when I say relatively short, it's always longer than you think, of course, but currently she finds herself in this very enviable position where she has her work shown in a bunch of local and further afield galleries. She has awards that she's won. She has students that she teaches art to as well. And it's just a really inspiring, really happy life for her. So I was talking to her, hey, what flipped that switch for you? And it was kind of funny because what she was talking about wasn't so much an artistic switch as a life switch. She was talking about how the desperation to do something really kind of woke her up and forced her to see things as they really, really were. And this is one of the things that I try to find for my clients who are writers. I try to find these triggers that are going to actually change them for the better and make them move forward in their writing. Because so many times, and this is something that's in my book, Writer's Block is Not Why Writers Fail. Writer's Block is not about inspiration. Writer's Block is about all the other things, all the other forms of resistance that prevent writers from actually launching themselves and making something of their work and making it sustain an entire life. So I started thinking, how does this apply to me? And I started realizing that there was a very surprising catalyst that took me from kind of wishing amateur writer who was, of course, writing for magazines. I had a PhD in literature, but was I successful as a writer, as the kind of writer that I wanted to be? Absolutely not. But there is something very strange that happened that totally changed my writing life forever. And no, it wasn't meeting some amazing author who became my mentor. It was a completely different issue. I actually opened a retail store. And spoiler alert, it failed. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but it didn't fail for bad reasons. It failed because I transitioned from having a shop which sold home and fashion accessories, to being a successful writer. You might be wondering, how the heck did that happen? And I'm going to say, listen on, because I think that some of the weird lessons I learned along the way from that life have served me better than anything I ever heard from another writer or anything that I read in a writing book or learned in a writing course. I think sometimes real life is the best teacher. And that's why I think that my writing coaching is really different. That's what I strive for it to be. A real world, actionable tip giving practice that's holistic, that fits into your life and that takes your experiences and shapes them into something that's really unique. So without further ado, let's jump into this episode that's going to tell you how owning a failed retail shop changed my writing career forever and taught me crucial, actionable lessons that made me into the writer I am today.
If you're a writer dreaming of becoming a successful author, join me, writing coach Karena Akhavein, on the How to Be an Author podcast, your weekly source for writing information, inspiration, and motivation.
Hello, welcome to the How to Be an Author podcast. I am writing coach Karena Akhavein. It is my passion in life to take writers like you from aspiring to successful, or to help you along whichever stage of the writing game you happen to find yourself in. I love to help writers to level up and to find the next chapter in their book and in their writing lives. So let's dive deep into this episode of the lessons that successful writers need to learn along the way to really move the needle and to become successful as professional writers. So this is kind of interesting. Let's start with the story of this failed retail shop of mine. And I keep saying it was failed, but actually it was quite successful for a time. And the whole change in what happened from retail shop to writer happened probably just as fast as the change from stay-at-home mom slash magazine editor and writer to shopkeeper. So what happened was I was living in Northern California and I was an academic, but I was working in fashion and lifestyle magazines. That was a big passion of mine, but really it was a secondary passion because writing's always been my primary passion. But I've had all of these chapters in life where my secondary passions kind of took a front seat. And I think that happens to all of us. I've had periods where I was a professional artist, like my friend, except I didn't keep at it, right? So that was the beginning of starting to realize that, persistence is key. We're going to be talking about that later today. But I was sitting there with a bunch of could've, should've, wish I could, why isn't this working out for me? And it was a really hard place to be, of kind of watching life go by. And yeah, it was great being a mom and it was great doing the volunteering I was doing. And I did love my magazine job, but you know what it doesn't do? It doesn't pay that great. And I wasn't doing the things that I needed to be a freelance writer who has enough writing jobs, whether they're, just online and nobody's going to see them. Like my ego was telling me, no, your work needs to be on a premium forum where people are going to see it and be like, oh, wow, that's aspirational. Well, that's silly if you want your bank account to be aspirational. But in any case, I didn't have too much time to worry about this issue because my husband, who was the primary earner in our relationship, ended up having an injury that really changed the way he looked at his work life. And he decided that he was not capable of sustaining a work schedule and the pressure that he was under at the time. Now, this led to a very scary situation because we had just done some work on our house, like a lot of work on our house, like a full remodel that we had survived our way through. And all of a sudden, after spending all that money, my husband's like, surprise, I don't think I can go to work anymore. And that was a moment of panic. And let me tell you, there's nothing like panic to change your life. I always say that the people who are the most successful are not successful because they decided to be. They're successful because they had to be. And if you look at somebody like J.K. Rowling, for example, who needed to make rent and she was absolutely destitute and desperately writing Harry Potter from the Starbucks or from her car, well, something like this happened to me because from one moment to the next, I went from being comfortable suburban mom going to my kids' school things and saying, oh, I'm picking and choosing between writing assignments. All of a sudden I had to think, okay, what's the next chapter of my life? And how am I going to scale down and find a way to start earning pretty darn fast? And let me tell you, many of us put ourselves in a situation where we've let our skills lapse, or, we don't have the contacts, or our resume is out of date, or we're just intimidated by the fact of, going back to the workplace or something like that. And so for me, I was like, I've always dreamed of having a retail shop. And I was lucky enough that I had this little cottage that I could redo in a rural town. And I was like, okay, we're going to go to this rural town, change our lives completely. There are going to be no expectations of who we are and what we do, and I'm going to open a store. Isn't that the craziest thing you've ever heard? Yeah, but being a writer sometimes takes a leap of faith. And I really find that this is comparable to what happens to your main character when the inciting incident happens, and that they don't have a choice but to go on this road that's been presented to them. So this is really interesting because another thing I like to do in my writing coaching is I really like to show my writers that so much of this writing advice also comes from what makes a good story. It comes from advice of what your character should do. I very much feel that you are the main character in your own life. So this is something where I love it when writing advice and writing life advice come together. And this is one of those times. I have a writing client who really is successful. I'm so proud of her for the good things that she's done. And she came to me when she had decided to quit her job to be a full-time writer. And in the course of that, she's had to make some major adjustments to her lifestyle, major sacrifices. But I think that that has lit a massive fire under her butt. It is what made her finally invest in herself. She has hired me as a writing coach. She has hired me as an editor in the past. She's has other editors as well. She has beta readers. She has cover designers. She is marketing the crap out of her book. And she's now on book number 2. And, she has really been a wonderful example of what happens when you go all in. And you don't tend to go all in unless you're a little bit crazy or a little bit desperate. So when I went all in, yeah, I was desperate. I needed to do something. So basically, within a month, we had packed up everything, sold our house, driven cross country, and I had gotten a business credit card that I put $15,000 on buying things for my store. And $15,000 is a scary amount of money when you don't know that anything else is going to be coming in. And then I ended up taking out another card and adding another 15. And that's all I had in my store. That's all I could do. So I ended up really cobbling something together, but I wanted it to be extraordinary and I had to be all in. And it was the scariest thing I've ever done. That feeling has powered me in my writing as well further down the road. But let's keep moving on that. But basically, I threw everything at it because I had to. And I knew that I had to make an investment because I had to. And this is a major thing that I see so many writers being frozen by, where they're like, oh yeah, I would get an ISBN for my book, but it costs a lot of money. You know what costs more? Not selling any books. Right? So it's so easy to see that, yeah, you have to make an investment when you're starting a business, but the same people who think that that's an obvious conclusion don't think that they need to invest in their writing life. They don't want to pay for a website. They don't want to pay for a cover. They don't want to pay for an editor or a writing coach. They don't want to pay for a writing course. They don't want to actually even invest the time, because that's another massive investment. Do you think I was having a blast doing all kinds of fun stuff while I was trying to start my store? No, because I was desperate. And so people, when they stepped into the shop, were blown away. Like, how did this happen in such a short time? Oh, because I had to. And the same goes for your writing career, right? So you need to jump, you need to do it, you need to be a little bit desperate, and you need to invest, whether it's time, work, or money, or all of those things. It's massive. And let me tell you, there were days when I was absolutely exhausted. There were times when I was painting my own store. I painted the whole thing. I put up a whole wall of fake boxwood. People thought I was insane. That was before that became kind of a common design thing. People thought I was crazy because there was no store like this in this little town. They had never seen anything like it. And that's another thing that you need to learn with your writing. Just because it doesn't exist doesn't mean that you can't go all in on it, but you need to have a plan. So for me, I was like, okay, I know that this is going to take some extra legwork to get people to understand what kind of store this is, since, they've never seen one before. The same thing can happen with your writing in your niche or in your subject matter. Remember that every time you depart from what is out there, you will get extra attention, but you will also have to do extra legwork. Really, really important. So let's jump forward to I finally get the things in my store that I need. And this is really important. It took so much organization for me to get up and running. My learning curve was massive. Okay. From building a social media account to opening a Square account to take payments from people. I mean, that was terrifying for me. I'm not a financial person. And I was so scared as I was opening these bank accounts and setting up these payment methods. I was thinking to myself, payments won't even come in. And I don't even know how to do this. And I've only ever done social media for fun and for my personal life. Now, for those of you who see me now and see that I've got, really nice TikTok following and a healthy social media presence and a great website, you might think, okay, who helped her with this? I helped me with this because I learned it. I was so intimidated at the beginning. So let this be a lesson to you that if you let the intimidation prevent you from learning the things that you absolutely must learn to do things like promote your work and take payments for your work, you are going to fall behind. You're going to be losing crucial income. And I talk about income a lot for writers, and I know that might be shocking. Many writing coaches talk only about the craft, but listen, I am a ground level realist when it comes to the writing thing. Many of you who dream of being writers dream of being professional writers. Professional means you're getting paid for your work. Setting up something so that you can collect payments and setting up multiple streams of income for yourself as a writer, whether that means you're giving courses like my artist friend, or whether you're selling merchandise in addition to your writing, or whether you're going freelance and writing articles. All of these are ways to make extra money. And believe me, when I was opening my store, I had to scramble to find as many alternative means of getting paid as I could find. And when you have a shop, that means different lines of things, different types of merchandise, things that you're going to sell in different ways. And believe me, I kept cycling through those things. So here's the important thing. You need to be all in, absolutely, but know that you can experiment within that. Your road can change. You can start in one place and end up in another, and that's okay. But never let up on being all in on this and on believing in yourself and on being strategic about building your career. That is so very important. Without you, like you're powering this thing, and without you, nothing happens. But even though I tell my writers there's no magic that happens, somehow when you're all in and when you are powering yourself and when you're believing in yourself, there is a magic that happens. So I hope that that's something that makes you feel better as I tell you about all the hard work and all of the failure and heartbreak that happens along the way. This is a happy story. I promise you. You learn along the way, and some of the hardest lessons are the most valuable lessons that you look back on and that you end up being so proud of at the end. Really important. So let's go back to my little shop that I'm now running. It's got a cute name. It's got these awesome windows that are so cute. And okay, I'm an intellectual. To go from intellectual to shop window in a rural town, I think that you can start to imagine that my conceptual designs that I thought were brilliant, they resulted in some head scratching in some of the locals who were like, wait, what's going on? What is this? Now, here's a horrible, difficult, embarrassing lesson that I learned along the way that actually really helps you with your writing and with your writing career. Okay. Nobody likes to feel dumb. Nobody likes to feel that they're not understanding what something is. So when I had these shop windows that were like kind of an in-joke with myself, people were turned off. They were like, wait, what's for sale here? And that sort of window I discovered can work in, a really hipster, trendy town. People will get it and be like, oh my God, that's amazing. But really, I think that this was the equivalent of me giving a 4-year-old, War and Peace to read. And the 4-year-old's not going to finish War and Peace because they're not going to understand it and they're going to get bored. And that's something that happens with a lot of us as writers too. We think that we need to write smart, we need to write complicated, we need to make the reader see that we're really brilliant. But no, what we're doing is we're making our reader feel dumb, or we're making them feel like it takes work to read your writing. And that's kind of like the curse of knowledge, right? So we all have the inability to imagine what it's like to not know something that we do know. So whether that is the vocabulary we're using, the turn of phrase, the concepts, if we're going too highfalutin, and I'm not saying you can't have poetry in your writing, but you need to be super conscious of the fact that this curse of knowledge can really be a psychological issue that will change how readers view your writing, right? So many times people will say, hey, could you explain this to me like I'm like a 5-year-old, or explain this to me like I'm a total novice? That is such an important skill. That is such an important skill. So I looked at these windows that I had created that were pretty and they were brilliant and they were fun and they were tongue in cheek. And I thought to myself, nope, we're going back to the drawing board and we're going to create a window where people can see that, hey, here's a handbag. I can buy that handbag. Sometimes your promotional materials as a writer need to come complete with a set of directions. I talk about when you're doing, your website or a newsletter, you need a call to action every time. And you feel like, oh my God, this is me ramming things down people's throats. Or why am I writing at a 9th grade level? You want to know something? Go look at every best-selling author. Their actual grade level is shockingly low when it comes to how they're writing. Yet their concepts are amazing. Their writing is touching. It's emotionally riveting, but they are not trying to show the reader how smart they are. They're trying to communicate something in a simple way that is going to be beautiful. So that's really, really important. That was a tough lesson to learn. And having the shop kind of made me learn it in a way that was way more obvious. Like when you're writing and your book's not selling, or when you have social media and you're not getting the resonance that you thought you would, or when your newsletter doesn't get the opens that you hope it would because you put in some weird title that doesn't have anything to do with anything, you're realizing in real time that some of the stuff needs to be crystal clear. Call to action everywhere. Clear, inciting incidents, clear characters, things where you can be like, oh, I definitely see who's speaking in this dialogue, or description where we can vividly see what is going on in a scene. All of these things are key. So when it came to my store, I started kind of walking through and being like, okay, I basically need to provide directions for the people who are coming in and shopping. I know that sounds crazy, but basically I walked through and I'm like, okay, which direction do I want them to walk through? Where do I want them to come in? And what do I want them to see? What do I want them to think? What can I tell them so that they feel welcome and like this is a place for them? How do I let them know what the prices are, what the value is to their life? All of that stuff. Those were skills that have served me as a writer ever since. Can you believe that? And hey, by the way, this is another thing. Be persistent, because when I first started to fail with people kind of walking by my store and going, what is this? I could have been like, well, that's it. That didn't work. I quit. It's stupid, right? To keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. That's insanity. However, if you're not a little crazy and if you don't keep trying and tweaking over and over and over again, you are not going to have what it takes to succeed as a creative or as a writer or as a business person. So the people who lose in this writing game, the only way to actually fail, truly fail, is to give up. And I don't think that any novice writer or creative is quite aware of how much persistence and how much time it takes to succeed in this game. You see all the so-called overnight successes. Please believe me when I say that those are the result of someone working in the wings for the longest time. It's the result of somebody who tried and failed. It's the result of somebody who kept pushing and tweaking and trying. And that is the thing that is so important. My artist friend is like, yeah, people think that I succeeded so fast, and I did, but it was at least 5 years from that oh shit moment to the first moment of being like, oh, my work is in 3 whole galleries in town. Why it just seems like it goes so fast when seen from the outside, but seen from the inside, that's a lot of panic. It's a lot of working hard. It's a lot of mortification that this thing failed again. And the other thing I would say is when I was in my store and I would stand there and I would have goals for myself each day. I would say, okay, today I hope to sell X amount of stuff, X quantity. And I also hope to sell these things over there because I want to make room for something else. And I also want to make one client smile or laugh. And these goals, sometimes I would hit them, sometimes I would surpass them, sometimes I wouldn't. And sometimes it wasn't so much my fault as something exterior, right? It was raining, nobody walked by. But sometimes I would look at that data that I had gathered, just kind of the personal data that I'd observed, and I would think, okay, there's something I could have done. I didn't do everything. I didn't push this in every direction. I could have done something more to attract or to convert that one extra client or buyer. So that's the really important thing. In your persistence, look at the analytics, look at the data, look at what you're doing that's working and not working. Look at those things because they will teach you so much, because I can guarantee that no writer out there who has succeeded didn't try their absolute hardest and didn't keep trying until something stuck. And any writer who's telling me, I tried everything and it didn't work, believe me, when I go and I do an audit of their website, I do an audit of their social media presence, I do an audit of their writing, and I say, I'm sorry, you've not thrown everything at this. You've not tried your hardest. You've not done everything. Because if you're telling me that your social media strategy is not working and you're not posting every day, I'm sorry, you're not doing everything you could. Now, I know that that can be overwhelming, right? And you don't have to do all of the stuff. Listen, I've been doing this now for years. Do I post every day on social media? Yes and no. Yes and no. But here's the funny thing that I have learned. I have learned that the energy that you devote to something is really important, the intention that you devote to something, and that your writing is not just one thing. Your writer platform is not just one thing. So you may feel like you didn't work on your writing today, but you worked on your writer platform, or maybe you got inspiration, or maybe you posted on one account and not the other, but you're still feeding that writing career. So my artist friend was telling me that it's really interesting how sometimes you're going to push really hard in one direction. For example, she did this whole postcard mailing campaign. And after doing that, she thought to herself, I totally failed with this. I spent a fortune on these postcards and I sent them out and I didn't get a single purchase of art from those postcards. And she thought to herself, what a failure. How pathetic. Why did I go so wrong? But you know what? Later that week, she started getting calls for people who wanted to take art classes with her. So she didn't sell any artworks for some reason, but something about that postcard made her potential clients feel like, you know what? I want to take art classes from this person. So she said, I learned that when you spend that energy, it's never wasted. That's a law of physics. When you spend that energy, it's never wasted. It can pay off in a way that you never expected. Now, I have seen this as an author. It's very funny, but when I'll post a piece of social media about something completely different, I'll sometimes see that when it's a successful post or a successful video, it'll pay off in book sales. And the video is not about that at all, but it pays off in book sales. Or when I launched my course From Idea to Publish in 6 months, I was doing a hard push on that. And I was like, okay, I really need to do this because I need to automate more of my processes because I want more time for writing and for other things. And you know what the result was? Not that many courses sold compared to how many people wanted one-on-one writing coaching, which was both really validating and really confusing and a little frustrating because I was like, hey, people, my course doesn't cost as much. From Idea to Publish in 6 months cost $497 for 6 months of completely holistic teaching for getting your idea down, to finishing your book, to publishing your book, to having your author platform, to nurturing your mindset. I was like, this is everything I know in a single course. And no, the message people got from that was, I want to talk to her in person. And while I love talking to people in person, it's more expensive to talk to me in person. So I thought that was really funny. I think that sometimes we don't see the value of our offerings and we don't quite understand what's going to resonate with someone, be it a client, a person walking into your shop, or a reader. So this is why tweaking your strategy and pushing on all fronts, but in the same direction generally, is a really, really good idea. So with my shop, I also realized that it was really important for me to be part of the community. You're not just sitting there alone. So even though you are a shop, right, in a street that has other shops and restaurants and residential, you're part of a community. As a writer, too many of us think that we are an island. Too many of us think that we have to write in isolation. And while it's true that isolation is a big part of writing, or rather being alone with your thoughts is a big part of writing, I don't think that being not part of a community is the answer. So, and also think about this. Your community might not be what you thought. When I first opened this store, I remember being so mortified at the ribbon cutting ceremony. Yeah, there was an actual ribbon cutting ceremony with a giant pair of scissors, ceremonial scissors. Look it up. They make these things. And they put a ribbon in front of my shop, and the newspaper, super dorky newspaper came, and a bunch of little shop owners came and people from the town. And I was kind of mortified and kind of delighted. This was a world that I had never been in my life. But those people who showed up, man, did I value that. That was the beginning of me understanding that I couldn't do things alone. I had been doing things online for so long. Even writing for a magazine, you get so disconnected from your community. And then I started realizing that, what I really loved about writing for magazines was going out and interviewing people from the community who are doing amazing things. So when you're a writer, build that community. And build that community in ways that feed your writing career, whether it's a community of people who want to learn from you or write with you or buy your books. All of that takes community. And also remember that community can change. You can start off in a community of students who are all learning together, and then you become a community of co-mentors, or you become a community of assets to each other who can provide a soundbite or a quote on your book. All of those things are amazing. Now, for me, this community lesson was so crucial. I had really been writing in my corner, and once I closed the shop, once that shop, quote, failed, right? We're still on this journey of from shop that I opened to shop that I closed. Once I did that, I knew that community was so important. And the first thing I did was that I started a writing group that was around a round table in a juice shop in another little town that I had moved to back in California. And that community is what then morphed during the pandemic to my Zoom writing group, which then morphed to TikTok writing advice, which then morphed to the career that I have today. So imagine what a journey that is. And it's hard to imagine how that journey is going to take shape, but it all boils down to community, and it all boils down to following that path. So that was a really important lesson to me. Absolutely. Now, another thing, when I had this shop and here I am working there and I have these great things and I'm getting just the best merchandise at this point. And, I have some walk-ins and I'm really lucky with the walk-ins of people coming to buy, and there's word of mouth and people are telling each other, go to this shop. That's great. That's the beginning of a presence. It's the beginning of a platform. But honestly, I feel like I didn't do enough marketing in different directions for this shop. I feel like I really, really limited myself in not having the time, the energy, or the inclination, because that first year with my shop, I was actually doing quite well financially. That shop actually made, in the first year, I made $160,000 profit. Can you believe that? And I don't think I even had the time to turn around and say, wow, I've done something amazing. I just kind of was on this treadmill. Literally, I was running and I thought, okay, it's doing okay. I've got all these people coming in. And I thought to myself, well, looks like I can skip that marketing step. Well, guess what? Then the bottom fell out of the retail market. And then there was work that started on the street that I was on. And it changed. The restaurant that was an anchor restaurant that had people coming and getting a little tipsy and then going shopping, that restaurant closed. And all of a sudden, the fact that I did not have a huge online presence, that was a big mistake. I had ignored that. I thought I could do without. And many of you who are writers have this issue where you think to yourself, I'm going to write it and they will come, or I'm going to write it and I'm actually planning on publishing conventionally and my publisher is going to market my book for me. You know what? You need to market your book and yourself as a brand, as an author, as early as possible. even before you start writing, if possible. And you need to have a multi-pronged approach, because what if you're super active on TikTok and they ban TikTok? What if you were doing just fine on Instagram and then the algorithm changes and now all of a sudden you're not getting seen? All of these things have kind of happened to me where, everything was working hunky-dory and then something gets blocked or something gets broken, and this platform of yours is too fragile because it doesn't have a strong foundation. Listen, writers and creatives, you need to market yourself. You have to take every opportunity to do it. And here's the little secret I learned though in my store. And this was something that helped so much, because before I opened my store and when I was writing for magazines and I had these books and they weren't selling, it was because I wasn't promoting them, and I wasn't promoting them because I was scared. And I was scared because I did not want to annoy people with my marketing. I didn't want to harass them. I didn't want to be salesy. I didn't want to be like, buy my book, buy my book. I thought that was the most horrible thing you could do. But when I had my shop and people would walk in and I would challenge myself to sell something to them, I would challenge myself to sell something to them that I believed in my core would make their life better. I imagine them, let's imagine as a handbag. They are going to be able to put their stuff in this handbag. They look so trendy. Their old handbag looks gross. People are going to compliment them. They're going to have a better day. They're going to have a smile on their face because of this handbag that they bought. And so that's how I taught myself to market to people. You have to believe in your core that your product, and your product is your writing, that it's going to improve your readers' lives. And so that implies many things. That implies that your work is good. That implies that your work is relatable. That implies that you know who your reader is and that you've found your ideal reader. And it implies that you're successfully finding them and communicating to them how your work's going to improve their lives. Now, how is it going to improve their lives? Maybe emotionally, maybe through entertainment, maybe through inspiration, maybe just making them smile. But that is so crucial. What an important lesson. And it's hilarious that I had to learn this lesson from having a retail shop. What a funny life we have, that our important lessons come from a completely different realm. But how lucky are we that we get to apply that to what's at hand? I feel our characters in our books are like this as well, where they learn these lessons from one thing, and if they manage to apply it to another thing, that's when they finally hit their goals. Now, when I first opened my shop, I, of course, had friends and family coming by and trying to support me by buying little things. And I felt kind of awkward about that, because I had been through the thing too, where you write a book and you kind of expect your friends and family to read it or to be there for you and to support you. And I've done an episode of this podcast where I say your friends and family are not your reader. Your friends and family are not your client. I mean, unless they are. And so you might be feeling guilty of like, okay, well, then my friends and family are not my reader. How are they going to support me? And what does that mean? And how do I find other people? But guess what? Your friends and family are not your reader more often than not, but they can still help you. So for me, my friends and family, I felt weird with them buying stuff, but you know what? It's a great start. Having friends and family start to buy things and then show those things off. It kind of starts the word of mouth going even more. And sometimes it can just even offer you that little financial payoff so that you can say, okay, now I can invest more. So for me in the shop, when my friends and family came in and bought things, I was able to start paying that credit card down. That was massive. And with that credit card being paid down, I was able to start buying more merchandise because I was learning along the way and I was putting in more things that were going to be more sellable in that store. And you can do the same thing with your writing. So one of my clients, she did a big book launch party with her friends and family. She invested in these balloons and she had stacks of books that she was going to sign for them. She had great food and it cost a lot of money, but then people bought enough books that it paid back for her cover design and it paid for some of the shipping that she was going to need to do for those advanced copies. That's awesome. So know that your friends and family are not your reader, but do not hesitate to call on those people to help you. And also they can help write reviews. They can help to recommend your book to their book club, things like that. Be a little bit inventive of how you can use your friends and family to help you out in your writing career without burning them out, without frustrating them. But definitely they are an asset for you. That is so important. I mean, you never know exactly what this path of yours is going to look like. It's going to take unexpected twists and turns, and having your friends and family there to support you is so crucial. Finding your tribe and then giving back when you can. That's really important too, right? You don't just take. So if you have an art show, you're thanking people from the community for being around, right? You're making it as good as you can. And if your friends and family are supporting your writing, you want to give back to them by creating an awesome book launch for them, or by thanking them in the pages of your book, or sending them a free copy. All of those things are really, really important. I think that that can help you to go from feeling isolated and not part of a community to feeling like this writing thing really fits into your life. That's awesome. Now, I want to rewind to something where I was talking about this technical knowledge that I had to gain as a shop owner. And this is really, really crucial because I learned how to do a point of sale system. I learned how to use a security system. I learned how to do inventory. I learned how to do a lot of things that I did not know how to do before. And was it fun? Not really. I like to learn, but those things, they're not that fun. Come on, let's admit it, right? And this happens a lot with writers. I was speaking to a writer who was a client, is a friend, and I find it a little bit frustrating sometimes to talk to her because sometimes she makes it her identity to not be good or knowledgeable about things that could help her in her writing career. That's harsh, right? But I was talking about, hey, you should probably get on Instagram. And she said, oh, I don't do Instagram. I don't know Instagram, and I don't know how to do it. And that's not who I am. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I guess you're also not a writer who sells her work. And then I said, well, I guess if you're looking for a writing job or something like that, you can go to the message boards or you can go to LinkedIn. She goes, oh, I don't do those things. That's not what I do. Okay, listen, social media and tech and tools and websites, they are not everything, but boy, are they important. Lack of technical knowledge is not an excuse. It is not a badge of honor. Don't make it your identity to be the person who doesn't know how to do those things. You are shooting yourself in the foot. It is not impossible to learn. I have learned. I have a whole rundown in my course from idea to published in 6 months. And P.S., do you think I knew how to make a course before? I didn't. I have a whole rundown in how to do these things. Because don't make it your identity to be the author who refuses to do the thing that is crucial for your writing career. That's outrageous. Really keep that in mind. So in my store, if I had said, I don't know how to use an inventory system, well, then where would I be? I would be not having a store. That's exactly what I'd be doing. So all of that is really, really crucial. Learning the skills, learning the technology, learning the tools. You need to do it. There's just no choice. Again, that desperation comes in really handy. And that was a lesson that I'm really glad that I learned, because now I'm talking about my course, for example. I had to learn how to do that. It was really, really hard. It was probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to learn. And you know what? I figured it out. Does it break sometimes? Is it frustrating? Of course it is. But it's important. Now, here's another thing that I had to learn. You are your best cheerleader. You cannot expect that other people will be clamoring for you all the time. Now, every time somebody writes a great article about your work or gives you a good review, that is so gratifying. But really, you do have to pump yourself up. You do have to be your best cheerleader. You do have to have that self-pride where you're like, I know my worth and I am going to stand up for myself and promote myself. Super important. And remember, there will be trolls. Absolutely, there will be trolls. I find, mean comments on my TikTok videos every day. And most of the time, they have nothing to do with the content. It's all like, oh, you're ugly. Okay, great. Thank you. That's ridiculous. That's a troll who is hurting in life. And that, I think, is not as painful as the people who get offended by your actual work, right? I'll have people say, oh, I don't read that genre, or I find that kind of shocking, or my God, your book cover is over the top. That's true. But having had a shop where people would walk in and be like, is that all there is? Or this is too crowded, which are, I would hear that in the same day. Or, oh, that window was kind of weird. Or, oh, I don't like this. You start to kind of develop a thick skin. And that thick skin is something that is crucial to have. You really do need to develop it. It is a tough lesson to learn, but a big one, that having a thick skin will take you far. But yeah, even in a shop, there were trolls. You cannot please everyone. So please yourself. Please your ideal reader only. One of the current books I have out under one of my pen names has a really cheeky cover. Even Amazon banned it. I can't advertise this book because they said this cover was so bad. It's not. It's funny. But when people see this cover, when my ideal reader sees this cover, they can't stop laughing in a delighted way. So, hello, that's my audience. The other ones who are like, oh my God, I'm unfollowing you because your cover is obscene. It's not. Again, it's not. That is not my audience. And I think it's great to divide people. I actually think that when you have someone walking by who goes, ew, that's not for me, that's weird, that's actually you're doing something right because you are taking one direction. You are taking a tack. You're going into a niche, and that's something that can be really crucial. So dig deep into that niche once you've found it. Let your freak flag fly. That is really important. Take pride in wowing the people who are your audience, right? Blow them away with really understanding what they want in your writing and with digging deep. And I know that it can be so painful to dig deep, and it can be so scary to be vulnerable and to show people how bizarre you are and what your thoughts are and what your emotions are. But when you can tap into that and really make somebody feel that they can actually feel a link to you, or that they can feel that they are, really feeling that your character is somebody that they can empathize with, or they can relate to, or that your merchandise that you're selling in your store is something that they really want because it solves that problem they had, or it makes them feel seen, or it makes them feel better. Now you've succeeded, right? In any realm. So I'm really curious, what kind of lessons have you learned in your life that you were able to take from your work life, for example, to your writing life? I'm fascinated to see how that works for other people because, for me, this has been a long journey, but it's been such a great learning journey that has definitely fed my writing. So let's fast forward with this story. I had to do other things such as hiring a manager. That was something I never thought I had to do. And that's something that we'll touch on in another podcast. But sometimes you have to hire people to do things, right? Like an editor, a writing coach, a cover designer. Hiring somebody sometimes is crucial. And for me, it happened because I had no other choice. I was actually moving away and I had this manager and I had to learn how to communicate. Communication, so key, such an important lesson in life. And then little by little, my store morphed into a creative space. And that's where I knew that I was kind of getting to where I needed to go in my career. I decided that, okay, I am ready now that my store is morphing from retail shop to creative space, to teaching space, to community space. That's where I knew that my writing life and my professional writing coach life was going to begin. And then I had to have the strength to say, you know what? This store thing is over. I'm going to stand on my own 2 feet as a writer. And it's going to be scary, and I'm going to be desperate, and I'm going to have to do things that I didn't think I'd have to do, and learn tech that I didn't have to learn, and put myself out there in ways that are really frightening and vulnerable. But that was something that, thanks to that whole lesson, thanks to that whole road, I had learned along the way. So I would love to hear your story. Please don't hesitate to give me a call and to sign up for a writer chat to see what writing coaching can do for you. And if you're curious about this whole journey of idea to published in 6 months with the whole holistic lessons and platform stuff all rolled into it, definitely go to my website, creativeandwritingcoach.com, and check it out. It's kind of awesome. Or become part of Writing Coach on Demand, where you get office hours every week to get a top up of inspo just like this. Now, if you're a Writing Coach on Demand client, you're going to be able to go check your extra bonus materials. There are going to be a lot of them this week. It's going to be kind of exciting. And I look forward to being with you next time on the How to Be an Author podcast. Thank you so much.
If you have any pressing writing-related questions or would like to be featured on the How to Be an Author podcast, please feel free to reach out on my website, creativeandwritingcoach.com.